Welcome to Regulatory Requirement for Medical Devices, including in vitro diagnostics in India, version 2, lecture 12, that is Medical Device Regulation, International Practices. Learning objective of this lecture: be aware what is international practices for regulation of the medical devices. Expected outcome: we will able to understand the medical device requirement of other major countries, the current directives of the European Union, the legislation and the classification of the medical devices and in vitro diagnostics, target audience, the personnel working in the medical device industry and in vitro diagnostic industry, innovators and startup involved in the manufacturing of the medical devices and in vitro diagnostics, regulatory affair personals, human ethics committee members, clinical trial team members, researchers, academicians, students and the person generally interested in medical devices and in vitro diagnostics. What will we learn in this lecture? We will understand what is the regulation in major countries, authority in that country responsible for regulation of the medical devices and in vitro diagnostics, the comparison of the regulatory requirement with the major countries and the harmonization of the regulations. All those topic we will cover in this lectures. Now come to the regulation of the medical devices in USA. In USA, the medical device regulation is controlled under the Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act. Under this act, medical devices are regulated and the agency who is responsible for regulation of the medical devices in USA, that is FDA, Food and Drug Administration. Under the Food and Drug Administration, there is a specific department, that is the Center for Devices and Radiological Health, that is CDRH, that is the primary accountable for pre and post market supervision of the medical devices in the US market. In USA, they have adopted risk based classification of the medical devices, wherein the devices are classified according to the risk associated with the devices and its intended use. In USA, the 3-tier classification system is there. Class 1 devices, that is the low risk devices, comes under the general control. Class 2, that is the intermediate risk devices, and class 3 devices, that is the high risk devices which require general control as well as the special control. Class 1 devices are the lowest risk devices in USA and they are regulated with the general controls which are well accepted norms relating to the labeling, manufacturing, post marketing surveillance and reporting. The devices are classified as class A status when there is a possible surety that the general controls alone will be sufficient to guarantee the safety and effectiveness of that particular devices. Moreover, the class A devices, the countermeasures such as seizures, recall prerogative, etc., they are granted to the Food and Drug Administrations. The formal scrutiny of the application by the FDA for class A devices is not required prior to launch of the product into the US market. The FDA does not regulate, does not evaluate the product separately, nor the requirement that the safety and effectiveness of class A devices is required before launch of the product into the market. So, only the general controls are there for class A devices in USA. Class 2 devices are those devices for which only general control are inadequate to establish the safety and efficacy, and also there are sufficient data to substantiate special control. Because these devices have the greater risk and harm as compared to the class 1 devices, hence the devices of class 2 bound by the regulation of the special control by US FDA. The class 2 devices needs FDA clearance, and the pre-market notification, that is 510K process before the devices is launched into US market. In 510K process, the medical device manufacturers must submit the data to prove that the new device is comparable to the legally marketed devices in the USA. Even though this can be generally be validated based on the bench and animal testing alone, certain 510K applications needs to submit the clinical data to the FDA for its approval. Class 2 devices, the example of the class 2 devices in USA are cardiac monitors, infusion pumps, single draps and oxygen mask. This type of devices is considered as a class 2 devices. Class 3 devices, these devices are those devices which are either life sustaining, supporting or considerable importance in preventing injury of human health. The example of class 3 devices are pacemaker, heart valve, coronary stents, etc. Because these class 3 devices are judged to pose the highest potential risk of illness or injury, hence the general as well as the special control alone are not sufficient to prove the safety and effectiveness of these devices, and therefore, for class 3 devices need pre-market approval from the FDA before they launch into the market. Without approval from the US FDA, these devices cannot be marketed in USA. Another devices, that is the humanitarian use devices. These devices are marketed for the limited population in entirely separate process terms as the humanitarian device exemptions HDE. These devices we will discuss in the subsequent slides, the details of humanitarian use devices, what are the regulatory requirements. Pre-market notification, that is 510K requirement. The pre-market notification, the manufacturer has to submit the application to the FDA for the notification, and the devices, the regulatory review is less rigorous as compared to the PMA approval of the devices. The 510K submission must prove that the new devices is comparable to already marketed devices in USA, and it is the duty of the sponsor to ascertain that the suitable devices to which they need to demonstrate that there is a new devices is comparable, they have to submit that information to US FDA. Before marketing clearance, the manufacturer must ensure that this device is adequately labeled with the requirement, with the labeling requirement as per US FDA, and also the devices cleared under the 510K are processed on the basis of preclinical testing only. There is no clinical data is required in human population for class 2 devices. Most of the applications, they are cleared by the FDA based on the preclinical data generated by the sponsor. Sometimes it may require to submit the clinical trial of the class 2 devices, but most of the time only based on the preclinical data, the 510K approval is been given by the US FDA. Pre-market approval process, that is the PMA approval, that is applicable for class 3 devices, which is the high risk devices. The PMA is the pre-market approval is the process of review of the application with respect to the safety, efficacy of all the class 3 devices, and it is the most rigorous requirement to examine by the US FDA for grant of pre-market approval of the class 3 devices. This PMA approval also requires the preclinical data as well as the clinical data to demonstrate the safety and effectiveness prior to marketing of the product in US market. Due to high level of the risk associated with class 3 devices, FDA has determined that the general as well as the special control alone are insufficient to assure the safety and efficacy of the devices. Therefore, these devices require PMA applications under section 515 of the Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act in order to obtain the marketing clearance. PMA is the most stringent type of the device marketing application required by the FDA, and the applicant must receive the approval from the FDA prior to marketing of the devices in US market. The PMA approval is based on the determination by the FDA that the PMA contains sufficient valid scientific evidence to assure that the device is safe and effective for its intended use. The FDA regulation provides 180 days time to review the PMA applications and to make the final decision in their applications. 180 days time have been given for review of the PMA application by US FDA, and this regulation governing the pre-market approval is prescribed in Title 21 Code of Federation Regulation CFR Part 814 pre-market approval. A class 3 devices that fails to meet the PMA requirement is considered to be adulterate under section 501 F of the FD and Cosmetic Act and cannot be marketed in US market. Humanitarian device exemptions, these are the devices marketed for the small population through an entire separate regulatory process. The humanitarian device exemption is regulatory pathway to allow the marketing approval of class 3 devices meant for small market. For these devices, if it is required for the population which is less than 4,000 patients in the USA, these exemptions are eligible for class 3 devices. After granting the HUD designation of the devices, the HDE for the approval of the intended use, the PMA approval, unlike the PMA approval, under HDA the sponsor is not expected to submit the clinical data to the FDA to prove the safety and efficacy, but they must submit the sufficient data proving that the device does not pose any unacceptable risk and that probable benefit to the device outweigh the risk. For HDE devices, there is no specific requirement for clinical data, though the manufacturer has to submit the data assuring that there is no unacceptable risk poses with the devices and the sufficient data is available to prove the benefit of the particular devices in certain population. Post marketing surveillance, the FDA includes the regulation of the devices after the approval. This functions has been carried out primarily by the medical device reporting form. The medical device manufacturers and the importer have required to have the process in place to respond the reports to the FDA any devices related death, serious adverse events or certain malfunction of the devices. The Safe Medical Device Act of 1990 requires the user facility to report device related death directly to FDA as well as to the manufacturer. In addition to the user facility, the manufacturer of the non-lethal event including the serious device related injury and malfunction has also required to be notified to FDA. The FDA maintain the database which summarizes all the medical device report which is received by US FDA, and in addition to the medical device reporting system, the FDA, that is CDRH, has power to mandate a more formal post-market surveillance program for certain devices, including the permanent implant like pacemaker and the stent, or life sustaining devices like left ventricular assist devices. If you see the regulation in European Union, we know that presently the medical device regulation in Europe, that is based on the medical device directive. The medical device directive regulate the safety and marketing of the medical devices in Europe since 1990s, and in Europe also the devices have been classified in 4 different classes based on the risk of the devices. Class 1, that includes the class 1S or class 1M, where class 1S considered as a sterile, and class 1M that includes the class 1 devices having the measuring mean for the measuring of certain parameter. Class 2A devices, that is low to moderate risk, class 2B devices, that is moderate to high risk, and class 3 devices, that is high risk devices. These devices have been classified based on the risk base as per the medical device directive or the diagnostic directive. In European Union, that total 26 members presently are there. In this includes the Australia, Belgium, Bulgaria, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Italy, Ireland, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malta, Netherlands, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain and Sweden. These 26 member states includes in the European Union, and the directive which was applicable in the European Union or the medical device directive, that is medical device directive 93/42/EEC, that is medical device directive for the medical devices. Other directive, that is directive 90/385/ECC, that is for active implantable medical devices, and the directive 98/79/EC, that is applicable for in vitro diagnostic medical devices. These 3 directives covers the regulation of the medical devices in Europe. The medical device directive 93/42/EEC, directive modified in vitro diagnostic directive 98/79/EC, blood derivative, that is 2000/70/EC and 2001/104/EC. The directive also related to the animal issue, that is 2003/32/EC. Reclassification of the breast implant, that is 2003/12/EC, and reclassification of hip, knee and shoulder joint implant, that is directive of 2005/250/EC. Related directives, the cosmetics 76/768/EEC, pharmaceutical products, the 2004/27/EC directive, personal protective equipments. For this, the directive MD D 89/686/EC, telecommunication equipment, directive 1999/5/EC, waste electrical and electronic equipments, that is directive 2002/96/EC is applicable. The European Commission have issued the guidance document explaining the implementation of this medical device directive. This guidance document issued by the European Commission have no legal base, but it represents the common understanding between the member state. The class 3 devices are ranked as the highest devices and have the high level of the scrutiny of the applications. The medical devices cannot be marketed in European Union without adhering the stringent regulation of the European Union. The one of the regulation in Europe, that is the CE certificates. The manufacturer has to obtain the CE certificate for their product which is to be marketed in European market. CE certificate is issued by the notified body which is registered with the national regulatory authority in that particular European country. All the medical devices in Europe must have the conformity mark of the CE before they can market, and this CE certificate also guarantee that the product can be freely marketed over the European Union without additional control, and it is carried out, that CE certification is carried out by the European Union accredited private organization, that is known as notified body. In Europe, the manufacturer can pick up the any notified body for grant of the CE certifications, and the notified body that will seek the certain materials from the manufacturer, certain literature based on the device classes. They will apprise the manufacturer conformity to the underlying the requirement mentioned in the directive, in the European directive. Class 2, class 3 and device of class A, certain device of class A require scrutiny of the application by the notified body. They must forward the following certain information they need to submit to the regulator, that is declaration of the conformity to the appropriate European Union directives, the particulars of the conformity assessment plan below. Also for the high risk devices, that is class 3 devices, they need design examination or the type examination or the relevant CE certificate provided by the notified body that need to be given to the concerned national regulatory authority of that European Union. In Europe, the notified body, they are the private agencies to enact the regulatory control over the medical devices in European Union. These notified bodies have the authority to grant the CE certificate for the medical devices to the manufacturers. The notified body are nominated, observed and apprised by the relevant member state through the national competent authority, and the most of the function which the FDA in USA is carried out while reviewing the application. In Europe, the notified body will do the scrutiny of such type of applications, and the certification for the quality certification is to be given to the manufacturer by the notified body after scrutiny of the application submitted to them. In Europe, the new medical device regulation document has been come up recently in 2017. This new medical device rule requirement documents has been produced to provide the guidance to the applicant as regard to the aspects falling within the scope of the agencies. The new medical device regulation, that is new directive, the directive is 2017/745, and the new in vitro diagnostic medical device regulation, that is EU 2007/746. This two new regulation has come up for regulation in European Union for medical devices, that is the Medical Device Regulation 2017/745, and for in vitro diagnostic, that is 2007/746. The Medical Device Regulation and the in vitro diagnostic regulation replaces the Medical Device Directive, which we have discussed in the previous slide, that is the Directive 93/42/EEC, 98/79 of EEC and 90/385/EEC for medical devices and in vitro diagnostics. The regulation, this new regulation entered into the force on the 25th May of 2017. However, the certain transition period has been given to the manufacturers, notified body and authorities to comply the new amendment, new changes of the law, and which will come into full application on 26th May 2020 for the medical devices and 26th May 2022 for in vitro diagnostics. 3 years time for the medical devices and 5 years times for in vitro diagnostics has been provided for implementation of this medical device in European Union. The transition timeline for full implementation of this medical device rule in Europe is given in this slide, that is the May 2020 is the implementation date of new law. May 22, that is the EC certificate of the conformity issued before May 27, 2017, which will expire in the year of 2022. May 2024, that period that is required for all the EC certificate issued 5 years from the date of issue or renewal date or 4 years from the medical device regulation date of the application, that is the 27th May 2020, whichever come first. And May 2025, the device certified under the MDD, whatever the earlier certification was provided to the manufacturer as per the medical device directive, that can no longer be sold or distributed in the European market. All the stakeholder of the medical devices and in vitro diagnostics, they have to confirm the requirement of this medical device rule 2017 in Europe. In Japan, if you see the Japan, the Pharmaceutical Medical Device Agency, that is the PMDA, that is the regulatory agency founded in 2004. They analyze, assess and suggest decision to the Ministry of Health, Labour and Family Welfare, but it has no jurisdiction to take eventual decision. So, Ministry of Health, Labour, Welfare, which is the central ministry, they have come up with the new regulation in 2005. New law was introduced in PMDA, which was harmonized in the line of the international that practices being followed. The law is known as the New Pharmaceutical Affair Law, that is PAL. The main difference of the international stipulation is that the Japan has additional needs for building and the manufacturing space. The manufacturer must work as per the market authorization holder process. In this process, the manufacturer is responsible for production of the medical devices and marketing authorization holder is accountable for launch of the product in Japan market. And also in Japan, the devices have been classified based on the risk, and the 4-tier system is there for classification of the medical devices. The class A devices, class 2, class 3 and class 4. Class 1 devices is low risk devices and class 4 is the high risk devices. Class 1 devices that need notification, no approval from PMDA is required. Class 2 devices needs device certificates, and class 3 and class 4 need device approval from PMDA. Clinical trial are not required for class 1 devices, and in principle it is also not applicable for class 2 devices. Sometimes class 3 devices require clinical trial. However, for class 4 devices clinical trial is mandatory. In Japan, the compulsory to follow the good vigilance practices, that is for applicable for the medical devices. In Australia, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, that is the nodal agency for responsible for regulation of the medical devices in Australia. Before launch of the medical devices in the Australian market, the medical devices must recorded in the database of the Australian Register of the Therapeutic Goods, that is ARTG. In Australia, the medical devices are classified based on the risk of the devices, and also in Australia the classification are like European agency, that is class 1 devices, class 2A, class 2B and class 3 devices, where class 3 devices are the highly risk devices, and also the active implantable devices, that is another devices they have classified. For in vitro diagnostics in Australia, there is a different classification system. For in vitro diagnostics, a manufacturer has to prove that the devices and the manufacturing process used to make the device adhere to the requirement of the therapeutic good legislation and under conformity assessment of the medical devices. The certificate granted by the regulatory body providing that the manufacturer has been assessed and has the proper system in place to manufacture the devices is known as the conformity assessment evidence, and the conformity assessment certificate and declaration of the conformity, and an application to include the medical devices in ARTG are the 3 documents which is essential to register the medical devices in Australia. In Canada, if you see the Canada, Health Canada is the nodal agency for regulation of the medical devices. Under the Health Canada, the therapeutic product divisions are there, which are actually responsible for regulation of the medical devices. Also in Canada, the medical devices have been classified based on the risk, and class 1, class 2, class 3 and class 4 devices have been classified based on the risk of the devices, and class 4 is the highest risk devices in Health Canada. The class 1 devices are counted to be lower risk and the post marketing monitoring is declared to be enough. Class 2 devices are licensed and are subject to the safety and efficacy need of the regulation. In addition to this, the manufacturer must obtain the valid quality certificates along with the post marketing control, and the high risk devices, that is class 3 and class 4 devices, they have added obligations and must fulfill the regulatory requirement of the pre-market safety and the efficacy assessment. In Russia, regulation of the medical devices is involved and includes the number of different regulatory authorities. Roszdravnadzor, that is the Federal Services on the Surveillance in Healthcare and Social Development, is the expert authority accountable for registration and assessing of the clinical safety and efficacy of the medical devices in Russia. GOST, that is GOST, the standards, that is the Federal Agency for the Technical Regulation and Metrology, that ensure that all the medical devices fulfill well established Russian benchmark of the quality. A GOST, or that is the quality certificate that is needed for import of any medical devices in Russia. The sanitary epidemiology conclusion, that is hygiene certificate, is also required before any medical devices that can be imported into the Russia. In Russia also the risk based system is applied, classifying the medical devices into the 4 classes: class 1 devices, class 2A, class 2B and class 3 devices. As usual, like other countries, class A devices is the low risk devices, class 3 devices is highest risk devices. In China, the medical devices are being regulated by the China that central FDA, that is the China Food and Drug Administration. In 2013, the CFDA takes some major steps like electronic validations, new approval regulation for innovative medical devices and exclusion from China compulsory certificate mark demands, and new online system for medical device resistant solicit the regulatory validations of their device classifications. Under new approval legislation of the innovative devices, qualifying the medical devices product would be given preference by review by the CFDA, but qualifying the medical devices must be produced in China and must be unique device to be registered in China. So, these are all about the regulations in different major countries. What are the, who are the agencies to regulate the medical devices, what are the classification applicable, which type of classification criteria they have adopted, and the law which is applicable in that particular country. We have discussed that. If you compare that, this slide that shows the comparison of the certain that parameter of the regulation of the medical device. In USA, the agency is the Federal Food and Drug and Cosmetic Act. In Europe, Medical Device Directive. Now that new regulation has come up, that is the MDR regulations on the medical devices and MDR regulation on the diagnostic, which will be effective from the May 2017, and phased wise manner that can be implemented in European country. The pre-market and the post-market supervision will be carried out by US FDA, and European Union it is by the notified body. Classification already we have discussed. In USA the 3-tier system is there: class 1, class 2 and class 3. In Europe the 4 class scheme is there: class 1, class 2A, class 2B, class 3. Approval system for class A in USA, there is a general control. Class 2 there is a pre-market notification, and for class 3 that is the special control, and pre-market approval is required. In Europe the CE certification is, CE marking is mandatory. In Japan the PMDA is the nodal agency. In Japan also the classification of the devices is 4-tier system: the class 1, class 2, class 3 and class 4. Class 1 that is the general that no regulation generally is required by PMDA. The class 2 devices notification is required. Class 3 and class 4 devices special control devices is there, and the approval from the PMDA is required. In Australia, Therapeutic Goods Administration is the nodal agency. Classification, the 4 type of classification like Europe, that is class 1, class 2A, class 2B, class 3. In Canada, Health Canada, under the Health Canada, Therapeutic Product Division is there, who is responsible for regulation of the medical devices in Canada. Also the classification scheme, the classification of the medical devices based on the risk: class 1, class 2, class 3 and class 4 devices have been classified. So, now harmonization of the medical device regulations, that is very important, because so many countries have different regulations, and the medical device industry they have faced lot of problem while registering their product in that country. So, the scheme of the harmonization of the medical device regulation, that forum has been created, that is in 1993 Global Harmonization Task Force was initiated by the major country, and the founder member of this task force are the Japan, European Union, United States, Australia and Canada, and they have created this forum with the objective that to harmonize the regulatory process throughout the different GSTF study groups, and also encourages the cutting edge technology and simplify the international trade. And the key steps by which the objective are achieved is through the preparation and issuing the harmonized regulatory guidance. The guidance prepared by the forum, they can be enacted by the member country, they can adopted by any of the member country or other country also, to have the uniform regulation in medical devices, and also to give the medical device industry a chance to fully accomplish its prospect. So, in last, the conclusion, if you see the global harmonization, the regulation of the medical devices around the world is very diverse, and there has been increase in the number, diversity and intricacy of the medical devices in the last 2 decades, and the regulation of these devices has also advanced due to the requirement of steady regulatory perspective, and the most of the country trying to harmonize the regulatory guidelines for the medical devices through their participation in the global harmonization task force. And outcome of this task force, along with the other that agency like Asian Harmonization Working Party or the Latin American or American Harmonization Working Party, they will play important role in the harmonization of the regulatory guidelines of the medical devices. And after taking the consideration of the fact, they can conclude that harmonized regulation of the medical devices will lead to the availability of the quality devices in these countries, and non-harmonization of the medical device regulation might lead to the serious concerns, and that will give the lot of problems to the manufacturers of the medical devices. So, these are the general discussion on the regulatory requirement of different countries. Harmonization of the regulatory requirement for the medical devices is the one of the initiative taken by the forum, that global harmonization task forum, that is created by the major country, that is European Union, Japan, United States, Australia and Canada. So, with this I hope you have basic idea about the regulatory requirement of major countries, what are the requirement, though the requirement whatever we have discussed in the previous lectures, it is more or less almost the same. Authority is different and their legislation are different, but the requirement as provided for import registration or the clinical trial, that are the almost same. This is all about these regulations, and will have lot of that discussion on the medical device regulation, internationally applicable law, the law of the country. So, with this we will conclude that lectures, and I hope you are now have full idea about the medical device regulation. You will also approach to the website of the CDSCO and also the CDSA for detailed information with respect to the regulation of the medical devices, and be ready for the test which will be conducted in due course. Thank you very much.